Hey everybody. Today I'm going to go over the fourth PowerPoint for Unit 2. We're going to cover state government today. So just like the federal government, North Carolina state government is split up into three branches. The first we'll cover, just like when we did the federal government, is the legislative branch. Make sure whenever you're going through this that you do this right here. You go put your address in, and then it'll tell you um, who your North Carolina House representative is, who your North Carolina Senate representative is, and also U.S. Um, House. But you probably already know that since you've probably already done the find your congressman assignment. So make sure you click on this and do that. But North Carolina's legislative branch is called the General Assembly. It's often also referred to as the NCGA or just the GA. Like the federal government, it is split up into two chambers. It's bicameral, just like the federal government, and it's the same names too. So it's the North Carolina House and the North Carolina Senate. All right, the General Assembly has certain powers. These are very similar to powers of the federal government. So first thing, statutes. Statutes are laws that apply to the entire state. So they're state laws. So there are certain laws in each state that are only applicable to that certain state, right? So these are just laws that apply to the state. Next is specific laws. These applies to just certain counties or cities. And then you got legislative oversight, just like at the federal level, determining how well laws are working. Then you've got appointing officials like to the Board of Governors, and then same at the federal level. Impeachment is also possible at the state level. All right, how a bill becomes a law in North Carolina. Someone first has to draft it, so they draw it up, write it up. Then they introduce the bill on the floor. This can happen in either house, in the House of Representatives or in the NC Senate. Then it gets referred to a committee. Then they debate on it, talk about it. If it's approved, it will go to the other house. So if it started in the NC Senate, it'll go to the NC House and vice versa. And then it goes to conference committee, and then it'll get signed by both the House and the Senate, and then it'll go to the governor's desk to be signed. All right. Our General Assembly is organized this way. The House, there are 120 members. You got to be at least 21 years old, be a U.S. citizen, and live in your district that you want to represent for a year or more. There is a Speaker of the House, just like there is at the federal level. The Senate, there are 50 NC Senate members. You got to be at least 25, a U.S. citizen. You have to have lived in North Carolina for at least 2 years and live in your district for a year. And just like at the federal level, the lieutenant governor is very similar to the vice president, but they do have some differences. We'll get into those later. But the lieutenant governor oversees the Senate, and then you've got your president pro tempore who does that if the lieutenant governor isn't there, just like at the federal level if the vice president's not there. The next branch, we've got the executive branch, at which the governor is the head of. In order to be governor of North Carolina, you got to be at least 30 years old. You have to have you have to have been a U.S. citizen for 5 or more years, and you have to have lived in North Carolina for at least 2 years. In North Carolina, we have the same term and term limits for governor, with the exception of you can only serve 2 consecutive terms. And what that means is that let's say, so Governor Cooper was elected in 2016. Let's say he wins re-election this year. He could not run for re-election in 2024, but he could, if he wanted to, in 2028. Whereas, at the federal level, it doesn't matter if it's consecutive or not. You can only serve 2 terms if you're president. All right, the lieutenant governor. So qualifications are the same as the governor. So I mentioned how the lieutenant governor is very similar to the office of the vice president. One of the differences is that, unlike the vice president, the lieutenant governor is elected separately from the governor. So that means that you can have a governor who is a member of, say, the Democratic Party, and then a lieutenant governor who is a member of the Republican Party. And that is exactly the case right now. As a matter of fact, Dan Forest is a Republican, Roy Cooper is a Democrat. line of succession. If the governor were to leave office for any reason, the lieutenant governor would then take over the mantle of governor. Um, Same term length, same term limits as the governor. And like I said, like very similar to the vice president at the federal level, the lieutenant governor is the president of the North Carolina Senate. All right, so you've got the North Carolina Council of State. All right, so similar to the lieutenant governor, these are 8 elected officials that head state agencies. So you may have, a Republican Secretary of State, a Democratic Insurance Commissioner, so on and so forth. These offices are all independent of the governor. Like we said, these people are elected. The Attorney General is the state's lawyer, so this represents the state of North Carolina in court, and they oversee the State Bureau of Investigation. They're the chief lawmaking officer in the state. You got the Superintendent of Public Instruction. They oversee the regulation of the North Carolina public school system. You got the state treasurer. These are just some of them. I mentioned the insurance commissioner. There's, an agriculture commissioner as well, or secretary of agriculture. So there's 8 of them, but it's important that you know they're independent of the governor and they have to get elected on their own. That's different from the cabinet of the governor. All right, so this is very similar to the federal level. The governor can appoint people to his cabinet. So these are people who are not elected. All right, so you've got the Department of Administration, who helps shape the state's budget. That's sort of like the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget at the federal level. The Department of Revenue, so responsible for state taxes, fees, licenses. Department of Transportation, they oversee infrastructure. So, like I said, these are just some of the examples. There are more than just these 3 right here. All right, our last branch is the judicial branch of the state of North Carolina. All right, so this goes in sequential order here. So at the top of North Carolina's judicial branch is the Supreme Court. You can see here that they have terms. Important to note that unlike the federal level, North Carolina judges are elected, not appointed. So every 8 years there are Supreme Court races. They determine, just like at the federal level, if North Carolina laws are constitutional or not, according to the North Carolina State Constitution. They will review lower court decisions underneath the Supreme Court. You've got the North Carolina Courts of Appeal, or the appellate courts, same thing. There are 15 appellate court judges. They hear cases in panels of 3, and they have to have a 2/3 decision to agree on something. Beneath that is the superior courts. They hear civil court cases amounting to $10,000 or greater. Superior courts, you have a trial by jury situation, and they also hear felonies. And then your district court, they handle low-level cases, so misdemeanors, family, traffic law, civil cases where less than $10,000 is being decided on. There is no trial by jury in district court cases. It's just a judge that decides. So make sure that you review this, and you can differentiate between the 4 levels. All right, so at the bottom is district court. Above that, superior court, courts of appeal, and the tippy top is the Supreme Court. All right, mentioned this earlier. Unlike at the federal level, judges in North Carolina have to be elected. All right, and then I have a poll here, just kind of asking you, do you like the fact that judges have to get elected in North Carolina, or would you rather they be appointed? So just tell me what you think about that. Roles of the Supreme Court in North Carolina, like we mentioned, they review lower court cases, interpret the state's constitution and laws. Here are current Supreme Court justices. I have circled the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So just like at the federal level, the U.S. Supreme Court, there is a Chief Justice at the state level for us as well, and that is Cherie Beasley here, who's actually the first black woman to ever be Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court, which is very historic. All right, other court officials, your clerk of superior court, magistrates, who we talked about at the federal level, and all these people still serve the same purpose as those at the federal level, but they're just at the state level. All right. All right. Public defenders, juries. So if you were to get arrested for something and you couldn't afford a lawyer, public defender, that's a lawyer who gets assigned cases by the court system. Public defenders are often stretched really thin. That's why oftentimes if you have a public defender, odds are, you know, you're probably going to have to enter into a plea deal of some sort because they're stretched so thin. There's not enough public defenders out there. Um, so they're often trying to look to avoid going to court. They want to try to strike a deal before having to go to court. Jury. All right. You got to be at least 18 years or older to serve on a jury. You got to be a citizen of the state and resident of your county. You have to be deemed mentally and physically competent, be able to understand English, and not be a convicted felon. Um, it's important while we talk about not just this, but everything from this PowerPoint. This is just for the state of North Carolina. Um, a lot of other states have very similar government setups, but some have very different government setups. All right, and here's just a diagram of the North Carolina court system. Um, so just kind of jot this down. Make sure you do the quiz on the next slide. But other than that, that's it. Thanks, guys.